Ja, men tjena och morsning och välkommen. Idag så är det här bara en liten sån här prelud. En liten inledning av mig, för jag ska visa någonting helt annat. Det är den här killen Matt Walsh som jag tycker är en av de skarpaste hjärnorna som finns på tuben just nu. Och det betyder väl att han åker ut snart. Men han är i alla fall väldigt, väldigt duktig. Och han tar upp någonting som faktiskt föll sig in väldigt märkligt. För jag läste bara häromdagen, jag är ju väldigt flygintresserad som många av er vet. Jag är gammal pilot också. Och det stod någonting någonstans om en garvad erfaren flygkapten och instruktör som suckade djupt och sa: den här idén om att vi nu också ska inkludera, att vi ska vara inkluderande när det gäller sånt som att köra flygplan. Det har inte gått så där jättebra, därför att många av de som faktiskt nu då kommer ut och ska sätta sig och åka runt med de här jättebästarna med hundratals passagerare ombord och som har ansvaret för deras liv, de är kort sagt urusla på jobbet. Det gör mig mycket orolig. Jag har många gånger, som du vet, använt just pilotjobbet för att liksom illustrera att det är ett oförlåtande jobb. Du kan inte säga om du har gjort misstag som har kostat 200 människor livet, så kan du inte säga: jag är så ledsen, jag ber om ursäkt. Nej, det går inte. Är du den killen med 4 streck längst fram till vänster i kärran med den oinskränkta makten som man faktiskt har ombord, då har du ett enormt ansvar. Och det är klart, mycket går på rutin och man är pilot egentligen inte för de rutinmässiga flygningarna. Gubbarna och tjejerna med för den delen, de finns där framme när det smäller till, när det blir riktiga problem. Det är då deras kunskap och deras erfarenhet verkligen gör avgöranden. Qantas hade ju en Airbus 380 som strax efter start ifrån Australien råkade ut för ett mycket allvarligt motorhaveri. Nu tror jag att det fanns 5 eller 6 supererfarna kaptener ombord som skulle vara dels med, dels som skulle de vara dubblade besättningen. Och en av dem var en sån här som skulle få på sin årliga flygkontroll. Då är det en annan kapten med som är ännu mer erfaren, och han sitter liksom och kollar bara att han lever upp till standards. Och så fick de problem. De samlade tankekraften hos alla de här erfarna gubbsen. Det var det som räddade kärran. Hade det suttit några nybörjare där så hade det tyvärr varit över. Och det här vet du med att det ska vara någon form av förändring på yrken och arbetsmarknad. Det har vi ju sett. I Sverige och även i USA, har jag fått mig sagt, så sänker man standarden och intagningskraven för exempelvis poliser. När det finns folk som kommer till universiteten, till fakulteterna, där det faktiskt finns riktiga lärare och professorer kvar, så har de mer än en gång suckat djupt och sagt: vad fan, de här eleverna kan ju inte knappt ens läsa, skriva, räkna. De är knappt skrivkunniga, de ska ta en djurkand, 180 poäng då. Och det är ett ordentligt pluggande i 4-5 år. På något sätt så, ja. Och lilla Greta, hon går ut ur gymnasiet med högsta betyg i allt. Är det så det har blivit nu i utbildningen? Att man behöver inte ens plugga, man ska bara vara PK och woke. Ja, då blir det är ungefär som i Nordkorea. När den store ledaren i Korea gick sin första golfrunda, sägs det, då gjorde han 18 stycken hole-in-one. Ja du, vilka krafter. Ta bara taxi i Sverige. När jag var ung, visste du då att polisen hade en tillsynsskyldighet för taxichaffisarna? Men det var ett rekorderligt skrå, kan jag säga. Det var för det mesta grabbar och farbröder som hade en hög yrkesstolthet och genomförde sina jobb perfekt, kunde varenda gata. Du kunde glömma kvar på fyllan och villan vad du ville i taxen, plånböcker, nycklar, arbetsportföljer. Du kanske till och med glömde frun. Men de kom tillbaka. Och de var snygga och välklädda i uniform och de hade regler att leva upp till. Jag kan bara säga så här. Hur är det nu? Hur gick det sen? Hittar de ens till adressen som de ska köra till? Jag har hemska exempel där till exempel gamla och svaga ska hem från sjukhus på sån här färdtjänst. Och så tippas de bara av i en snödriva därför att jag hittar inte din adressen, va? Jaha, det är dagens taxi det. När våra gamla ligger på sjukan eller på ålderdomshemmen och får människor som inte ens kan prata svenska. Har du gått upp eller ner då i rekryteringen? Ja, den här listan kan göras hur lång som helst. Men det finns någonting som nästan är ännu viktigare än piloter. Och de är väldigt viktiga. Teknikerna som servar kärrorna och som sätter ihop alla de där grejerna, miljontals bitarna så att det funkar. Ja, de är oerhört viktiga. Och oerhört välutbildade. Eller vad? Får hoppas att de är det än. Men någon som fyller en fantastiskt viktig funktion och som du säkert aldrig hört talas om än. Det är flygtrafikledare. Deras funktion, speciellt när det gäller väldigt trafikerade områden. Ta bara de här stora flygplatserna runt till exempel Paris, London och New York och Chicago, jag vet inte alls. Eller jätteflygplatserna i Asien. Det är en hård trafik och det måste fungera därför att avstånden och säkerhetsmarginalerna, de finns där. Men det är inte några stora avstånd vi pratar om. Men det löser dessa fantastiska ATC, det vill säga flygtrafikledarna. Därför de är de är kända för att de kan tänka som i ett schackspel. Flera saker på en gång och de klarar hög belastning. Och tidigare så var det stenhårt för att du skulle bli flygtrafikledare. Är det nu? Ja, jag vet inte. Men låt oss titta som sagt på vad Matt Walsh har att säga. Och det kanske gör att vi förfäras alla lite grann. Tack för att du kikade in. Och innan jag glömmer det. Snälla, tryck gärna på tumme upp, prenumerera, lilla klockan och så den där super thanks-knappen kanske. Nu går vi till duktige Matt Walsh. Vi ses, hej!
8 miles, turn right to heading 044. It's below 700 now, it's still going down. 675, 650, 625. He's holding. He's down.
So here's an interesting thought experiment. Imagine one of your friends comes up to you with a big smile on his face and tells you that he just got a brand new job. And he's vague on the specifics, but he says it's a federal government job and it pays 6 figures. And it didn't require any kind of bachelor or associate degree or a physical fitness test or anything like that. But your friend does tell you that as part of the application process, he had to complete a couple of computer exams. And then as the conversation goes on, your friend recounts a few of the questions from one of those exams. He tells you the questions went something like this, quote, would more classmates remember you as humble or dominant? What age did you first start making money? How many high school sports did you participate in? Now, at this point, you're thinking to yourself, well, that's a little bit odd. What kind of job would ask questions like this? This all sounds kind of dumb and unserious. So your friend reassures you that he had to complete a second test as well. And the second test asked slightly more challenging questions like, what's the difference between the numbers 8 and 6? And if you answered 2, then congratulations, you could also pass this test and get this job. Now, at this point, if you had to guess what job your friend just landed, what guess would you make? Based on all the information provided and knowing this is a government job, what would you think? Well, you'd probably make some obvious assumptions right away. You'd think at a minimum that whatever job your friend is gunning for in the federal government, it can't be that important. And indeed, there are a lot of very unimportant jobs in the federal government, jobs that were made for incompetent and unimpressive people. I mean, the government kind of exists to provide jobs for those sorts of people. So you might think, well, maybe it's one of those jobs. Maybe your friend got a gig in the Department of Education, for example, or the IRS. That would make sense. But then imagine that your friend informs you that he is not working in some frivolous government agency that contributes nothing of value to humanity. Imagine he tells you that, in fact, he applied to be an air traffic controller. And after just a few months of training, very soon, he's probably going to be directing planes with hundreds of people on board. Now, this may be a hypothetical thought experiment, but it is very much grounded in reality. I didn't make up any of the test questions I mentioned earlier. They're all based on real air traffic control exams or practice exams. Now, 10 years ago, this little hypothetical scenario would have been unthinkable. But everything changed very quickly in 2013 when the Obama administration embarked on a plan to diversify the ranks of air traffic controllers. Obama's FAA chief at the time announced that he intended to transform the agency, which includes air traffic control, into a, quote, more diverse workplace. As part of that plan, air traffic controllers no longer needed to take a more demanding cognitive assessment before being hired. Instead, all they needed was a high school diploma and the ability to speak English and apparently to do very basic math that like a third grader could do. All the tests were dumbed down to the point of being absurd and pointless. Now, the result over the past decade has been exactly what you would expect, even if you haven't heard about this. The number of air traffic controllers who are not white men has significantly increased, while the number of white men has decreased. That was the whole idea, according to the FAA. This is what they tell us. Coincidentally, so have the number of near collisions involving commercial airlines. Those have increased significantly. According to a database maintained by NASA, which relies on data self-reported by pilots, the number of near misses has more than doubled over the past 10 years. In just the past year, there have been more than 300 near misses involving commercial airlines, averaging more than 5 per week. And just to emphasize that point again, they diversify the FAA, and near misses immediately doubled. Now, correlation does not prove causation, but it can point towards it. And in this case, there is a giant glowing sign pointing in that direction. Of course, only a handful of these incidents receive any major media attention, so it's easy to underestimate the scale of the problem. No matter what social media platforms you frequent, you don't really hear about a lot of this. And that's why, in a moment, I'm going to go through some of the near misses that have gotten very little coverage. But I'll start with an incident that did get some attention from the national news media because it helps put the broader problem into some context. So this incident happened in July when air traffic controllers put 2 aircraft, an Allegiant Air passenger plane and a Gulfstream jet, on a collision course shortly after the Allegiant plane had taken off from Fort Lauderdale Hollywood International Airport. And here's how that all played out. Watch.
The FAA and NTSB are investigating a very close call in the skies over South Florida. An Allegiant Airlines plane and a private jet forced to take evasive action to avoid a collision at 23,000 feet. Here's Tom Costello.
Allegiant Air 485 had just taken off from Fort Lauderdale, headed for Lexington, Kentucky when it happened. The pilot forced to make a sudden extreme climb, 600 feet in seconds, to avoid another plane, throwing flight attendants to the floor and terrifying passengers, including Jerica Thacker and her family, flying to Kentucky after a Caribbean cruise.
It was honestly the scariest thing I've ever been through. It felt like when you go on the top of a roller coaster and you go straight down from the highest point.
The FAA says it happened when controllers put the Allegiant flight and a Gulfstream business jet on intersecting routes both at 23,000 feet. Climb. That's when both planes' collision avoidance warnings, known as TCAS, activated, ordering the Allegiant pilot to immediately climb and the Gulfstream pilot to descend.
If not for TCAS, these airplanes would have gotten very, very, very close or have potentially collided.
Now, the report goes on to mention that the pilot's last-minute evasive maneuver was so extreme that it sent one flight attendant to the hospital. That's how close these things got. And if there's anything reassuring in that clip, something that might make you feel a little better if you, like me, plan on boarding a plane in the near future, it's that the automated software called TCAS saved the day. This is a system that relies on transponders that are installed on all domestic aircraft. And as you heard, it's capable of sounding an alarm in the cockpit and directing planes away from one another if there's a risk of an imminent collision. It's a fail-safe for when air traffic controllers mess up and command planes to fly into one another. But TCAS isn't perfect. It certainly doesn't prevent all mid-air collisions. In 2002, 2 passenger jets collided over Germany because one pilot followed TCAS while another listened to the air traffic controller, who incidentally was later murdered by a family member of one of the passengers. That's a whole story. In fact, just this year, TCAS failed to prevent a mid-air collision at an international airport in this country, Houston Hobby. And fortunately and miraculously, nobody died as a result of that collision, but it was very close to being disastrous, as you can imagine. And that incident illustrates the obvious, which is that a fail-safe is just that. It's a fail-safe. It's not capable of solving all potential problems. It's not capable of solving all mid-air collisions, nor is it designed to. especially when planes are close to the ground and covering a lot of ground very quickly in close proximity to one another. Things can happen too quickly for the system to respond. And those are the kinds of incidents that are happening more and more often, I'm afraid to report. Grand Canyon University is an affordable private Christian university based in Phoenix, Arizona. They are dedicated to making education fit into your already busy schedule, which is why they offer 270 of their academic programs online. From scholarships to academic support, GCU's graduation team provides you with the personal support you need to obtain your goals. GCU's online programs offer you the freedom to earn your degree on your own time from wherever you are. GCU is praised for its culture of community, giving, and impact. They integrate the free market system and a welcoming Christian worldview into all their academic programs. Achieve your goals with a personalized plan and a supportive team behind you. Find your purpose at Grand Canyon University. Private, Christian, affordable. Visit gcu.edu. That's gcu.edu. A month ago at Portland International Airport, for example, an Alaska Airlines jet turned directly into the path of a departing SkyWest airliner. Air traffic controllers didn't notice this until the planes were right on top of each other. And in that case, the Alaska plane was trying to land, but it had to execute a go-around because of high winds. And around the same time, the air traffic controller was telling a departing SkyWest plane to turn right. But for some reason, the Alaska pilot responds to that command, and he turns right into the path of the SkyWest plane. The controller completely misses this until pretty much the last possible moment. Radar data shows that the planes came within 250 feet vertically and less than 2,000 feet horizontally, which is very, very close in plane terms. An even closer near miss took place in August at San Diego International Airport. Controllers cleared a private plane to land right on top of a Southwest plane. And they noticed their mistake just before the private plane hit the Southwest jet on the runway. The plane got within 100 feet of the Southwest passenger jet. Now, there's no TCAS system that can prevent something like that either. If the visibility had been worse, and if the controllers didn't notice the problem, there would have been a collision, and hundreds of people would likely be dead. You can go to YouTube and find many clips showing these near misses. Most of them don't translate well for the audio podcast listeners, so we're not going to play them here. But I do want to show you one for those who can see the visuals. And this may be the most one of the most shocking recent examples. It's from JFK Airport in New York City earlier this month, which is one of the busiest airports in the world. An American Airlines passenger jet was lining up for its approach when air traffic controllers told a small private plane to line up for a parallel runway. But the private plane didn't follow that instruction. Instead, it made a beeline for the same runway the American Airlines plane was going for. At no point in this process did controllers notice the problem. They also didn't notice that the private planes didn't read back the right clearance. Instead, the only person who noticed anything wrong were the pilots of the American Airlines jet when the private plane was already right on top of them. Watch this.
Good speed 235, turn left heading 260, intercept 22 right, localizer.
Left 260, intercept localizer, good speed 235.
American 28, maintain 170 knots, 60 mean towers 19-1. American 28, 170 knots, 60 mean towers 19-1.
178, and where's this Pilatus going?
He's landing the parallel, American 28, 22 right.
He is right above us, American 2228.
American 28, 170 knots, 6 CMA. At speed 235, flatting 180, sir. It appears you joined 22 left.
Roger, we'll fly heading 180, good speed 235.
We're breaking off for an American 28. He's right above us.
Yeah, we were watching on the scope. It got a little tight.
It got way too tight. If we hadn't bailed out, we would have collided.
So if we hadn't bailed out, we would have collided, is what's said there. And that's what the pilot of an American Airlines Airbus said just a couple of weeks ago at JFK Airport. There was apparently no TCAS instruction to take evasive action. If there had been, the pilots should have called it out, but they didn't. There was certainly no ATC warning. And one of the pilots just looked out of his window or maybe saw something on the screen and realized the plane was coming right for him. And he realized it just in time to save a lot of lives. Now, I could go on and on. There's the Southwest Airlines flight on July 2nd, which had to abort its landing at New Orleans International Airport because of a Delta plane that was taking off from the same runway. The passenger planes came within seconds of hitting each other. And that same month, an American Airlines plane nearly crashed into a Frontier Airlines jet on takeoff because nobody, including the ground controllers, noticed that the nose of the Frontier Airlines jet was jutting out into the runway. Earlier this year, in February, an air traffic controller routed a Spirit's airline flight within 200 vertical feet and 700 horizontal feet of a cargo plane. So you get the point. Now, it's true that we can't blame this dramatic rise of near misses solely on diversity and equity efforts. Single variable explanations are rarely sufficient, especially when you have a complex issue like this. For one thing, when Ronald Reagan fired more than 10,000 air traffic controllers who went on strike back in the 80s in violation of federal law, a bunch of new controllers needed to be hired. And many of those controllers recently hit retirement age all at the same time, which creates a staffing crunch. And that's also part of the issue. But that staffing crunch was foreseeable. It's been obvious that it would happen since Reagan fired the controllers more than 4 decades ago. The problem is that instead of providing incentives for competent people to become air traffic controllers, say by raising the salary, providing more training, offering better hours, those sorts of things, the government chose to do what it always does. It drastically lowered the standards in the name of equity. And the Biden administration is still proud of this. Right now, on the FAA's website, you'll find this line, quote, "The mission of the FAA involves securing the skies of a diverse nation. It only makes sense that the workforce responsible for that mission reflects the nation that it serves." Well, actually, no, that doesn't make sense. The job of the FAA and air traffic control is preventing catastrophic accidents where a lot of people die. Doesn't matter what the workforce looks like. Everybody knows this because deep down, everybody knows that diversity doesn't actually matter. Everybody knows that. And that's why no passenger on a plane has ever cared in the slightest about the racial makeup of the guys in the cockpit or the ones on the ground directing the plane. Just like nobody's ever cared about the diversity of fire departments when they're trapped in a burning building. Nobody's ever cared about diversity among brain surgeons when they have a tumor that needs to be removed. When it comes down to it, when it really matters, diversity doesn't matter. And we all know it. But unfortunately, that's what the FAA has been focused on lately. Just a year ago, the FAA launched yet another initiative to diversify the ranks of air traffic controllers, meaning to hire people based on qualities other than competence. The FAA calls this the BATC campaign. The agency says in a press release that, quote, "Building on last year's successful campaign to receive more applications from women and other underrepresented groups, the FAA will again work with diverse organizations, host Instagram live conversations, and work with social media influencers." So that's what the FAA is working on right now as we have this catastrophic rise in near misses at airports and in the skies. They're working on getting more women and underrepresented groups by partnering with Instagram influencers. So they want to get people, into the towers, air traffic control. They want to get the sorts of people who are listening to Instagram influencers. So this is a disaster waiting to happen. That much is clear. What's not clear is whether we'll be getting a workforce that's capable of preventing 2 jetliners full of passengers from colliding with one another while they're each going in excess of 500 miles an hour. And that is alarming, to say the least, because every single week we're discovering that the existing crop of air traffic controllers is barely capable of doing that. Now, keep in mind, this is all happening even as airlines also begin their own quest to add more equity to their ranks. It was only a couple of years ago that United Airlines pledged to diversify its pilots, and many other airlines have followed suit. So very soon, we will have diverse air traffic controllers directing diverse airline pilots who have all been hired for reasons other than their skill and competence, while thousands of lives hang in the balance. And inevitably, many are lost in the process because that's where this will go. Now, you often hear aviation experts say that nothing ever gets fixed until a lot of people die, which is not a thought that will help cure your anxiety about flying, but it's true. It's what they say, and it's been true throughout the history of aviation. Planes didn't have wind shear detectors until commercial airliners started crashing in bad weather, just shy of the runway. TCAS wasn't mandatory until there were a lot of mid-air collisions. Pilots didn't have to de-ice until an Air Florida plane nosedived into the Potomac after sitting for too long on the tarmac on a snowy day. What this means is that if history is any guide, soon enough, we may finally start to get some solutions to the air traffic control debacle we're seeing right now all over the country, from Portland to San Diego to New Orleans to New York, to pretty much every other major metropolitan area in the country. And that's because, as problematic as it may be for the Biden administration's equity agenda, we're closer than we've been in more than a decade to a disaster of truly historic proportions. Like, it is going to happen, and probably soon. And when it does, a lot of people will die. And then, and only then, when it's too late, will anything be done about the problem. Thanks for checking out this video. If you'd like to listen to my full podcast on the go, you can check out The Matt Walsh Show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.